Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ooh, let's try again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Amen. Amen. It's been a long day, but it's a wonderful day, isn't it?
Amen.
All right, as is our custom, let's pray before we begin. Gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you once again, asking for your presence to be with us. We want to thank you and praise you for the Sabbath day that you've given us. I want to thank you so much for this church family and their love for you and their love for us. And I want to ask for you to give the Holy Spirit to Laura and myself and Nalani at a certain point and everyone here, Father, so that we may bring honor and glory to you, so that we may share our testimony about how you've worked in our lives and grow closer to everyone here, Lord, which is what we'll be doing for eternity, sharing our love for you and what you've done for us. So we thank you for hearing and answering our prayer. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, I'm going to start out this part of it. And Lord's been laying something on my heart the last few days. And I've been kind of saying, no, not really, not that. And then he's been going, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. Oh, you really want me to share this? And so he's like, yep, I really, so it's due. And it's not going away, so I decided to do what he's asking me to do. So I'm going to go back. This is about our health journey, but I'm going to take it a little bit further back to 1957. In 1957, the world was a much simpler place. You're going to sit down more. The world was a little long before I was born. A little simpler place than it is today, right? Would you all agree? Sin was called by its right name, correct? Yeah, even, let's see, I graduated in 1975, and when a young couple decided to live together, y'all know what that was called then?
Shacking up.
Shacking up or living in sin. Yeah, that's what it's called in 75. So in 1957, this gentleman of 40 years old met this lady of 40 years old, and together they each had their own families of 3 children. And together they decided to leave their respective families and go off together. A year or 2 later, a little baby girl was born, and she didn't have any idea that her mommy and daddy weren't married. And she didn't have any idea the world that was going to happen around her. And as she grew up, this little girl had a desire to go to church. Her mommy used to be a Sunday school teacher, and she loved God and tried to follow God and bring her first 3 daughters up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. But she was married, oddly enough, to a Seventh-day Adventist, backsliding, rebellious Seventh-day Adventist, who didn't show to her the love of God. And so she left this man with her 3 daughters at a critical time in their life, and they were 10, 16, and 17. And so this little girl that was born in 1957 was brought into a world of sin, and in a family that really wasn't a family that was ordained of God. But she didn't have a clue that her mommy and daddy weren't married, like I said. And so over the years, as she would want to go to church, her parents didn't want to go to church. And that little girl is me. And I went to church alone. Most of my life, I had this desire to go to church. And I had no idea why I liked to go to church. And I remember being in church, in a Sunday-keeping church, and I remember them telling me, if you're not baptized, you will burn and go to hell. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. So I wanted to be baptized. And I asked my mom and dad, have I been baptized? Oh, no, you haven't been baptized. And I said, why? Well, the answer was because we want you to decide what you want to be. So when you grow up, you can decide what you want to be and you can get baptized. And that sounds kind of nice, doesn't it? But in reality, is that what God wants for our children? To grow up and to decide for themselves? No, not at all. That's why He gives us parents. So I continued to go to church wherein I could. And I sang in the choir. I was in 7th grade, and I would walk, and I would go to church and sing in the choir, and I'd ask my mom and dad to come. But they never came to church, but they would come on Easter Sunday when I was singing in the choir. And I just kept feeling this yearning to go to church, but not really knowing why. And then, because I didn't have anybody around me to really support me in that, I just kind of kept drifting how I was. And I ended up meeting my husband. I was 18 and he was 17. And he was headed for a college-bound career and a psychologist. And his family was very affluent. His father was a comptroller for General Motors, which is the man that signs the checks. So he had a pretty prominent role in administration with GM. And my family was a little different. My father had to quit school at the 8th grade to work on the farm because his older brother got called to the war. And my dad he worked with his hands. He was uneducated. My mom had to quit school when she was in the 11th grade. She was the first of 5 children, and she needed to stay home and help with the family and also provide for the family. So I kind of was from the other side of the tracks. They were wanting better for their son, and I was not that. And so they encouraged us to live together for 2 years. Or not 2 years, but just to live together till he would realize that he would outgrow me and then move on. And then, I don't know where I would be, but he would be in a better place. And so we did that. So here we were, repeating the sins of my parents and living in sin. And at this time, I didn't really have an idea that this is what happened to my parents. A few years after we were married, I decided to have, must be a 25th wedding anniversary for my parents. I figured out how long it would be because they always told me that they were married 2 years before I was born. So I thought, okay, when I'm 23, they'll have been married 25 years, and so I'll have a 25th wedding anniversary party for them. Won't that be fun? And so I talked with my sisters from my mom's side, and my sisters and my brothers from my dad's side, and which was always a little strange, but I could never figure it out. But they all knew what happened to their mom and their dad. They each lost their parent that I had, but I didn't quite understand that. So as I'm trying to get together and have this party for my folks, one of my sisters says to me, they haven't been married 25 years. I don't even know if they're married today. So imagine how that rocked my world. I'm sorry, this is not planned. Aww. So anyway, I called my aunts and I found out it's true. They hadn't gotten married. And so I called my parents and I asked them, I said, wow, I just found this out. And I need to pray. Heavenly Father, I ask you to please help me to hold back the tears and to just share my story because it just shows how powerfully you work. And help me to not be emotional and help me to learn and to help others because you are amazing. So I thank you, Jesus, for hearing my prayer. Amen. Amen. So I talked with my parents and they told me that they did get married. They actually got married after I got married. And it was very hard for my mom to live like that. My mom had a lot of bitterness toward my dad. And I really didn't understand what was happening in my life until we were in the Adventist church and I was reading in Spirit of Prophecy and I really should have liked it because it really struck my heart. And it said, I kept wondering, sometimes you wonder why these bad things happen to you, and sometimes you wonder why these good things happen to you. And I still today, I marvel, like, how come I get to know about this movement? How come I get to know about the Sabbath? How come I get to know about God's last day church and the truth? Because it's really a privilege and an honor, and not everybody knows about it. Actually, very few people know about it, right? Actually, most of the people in our Seventh-day Adventist church, do they really know the truth? Do they really know Jesus and what he wants to do in their lives? And so I'm like, wow, how do I get to know this? And I was reading, and Ellen White writes that the angels of God, they're constantly wooing the hearts of humanity. And the difference is that some of us respond to that wooing and that drawing, and some of us don't. That's the only difference. And as a little girl, I seem to be responding to the Lord calling to my heart to just go to church. That was it. Just go to church. And I was like, wow. And so we have a granddaughter. And her name is Nyalusha. She had a very soft heart towards spiritual things. This little girl at 18 months, would pray. She would fold her hands and she asked to pray. And she's naturally bent toward the wooing of the angels. And I see them laboring. And to this day, I'm so grateful to God because He labors for all of us. And I just was kind of answering that heart's call. And I'm sad that it took me, I'm 60, and it took me till 40 to come into the church. But I'm so grateful for what He did. So my husband and I are married. The plan of living together didn't work. And we have a son that is soon to be 40. And we have another daughter, Elizabeth, who both came into the church and have left the church, sadly. And then we have Laura, who's 31. And then we have Nalani, who's 13. And when we were married, we wanted to raise our children. My husband didn't want anything to do with organized religion. He grew up going to church and didn't like all of the challenges in the church, the strife and the unchristlike behavior, all the challenges. And so he went to college and he liked the Eastern Indian religions. He really thought those were better religions. And so as I have Ian and I have Elizabeth, and before Laura, I was determined to have them baptized because remember, as a little girl, I was taught what? You go to hell and you burn forever if you're not baptized. So now I have a little boy, I have a little girl, and I don't want that to happen to them, right? But I'm not a church member. I don't go to church, but that's in the back of my mind. I don't want that to happen to them. So I tell my husband I want to get my children baptized. And he's like, oh, he doesn't want to do that. We have pictures because I'm very persistent when I think something's right and I want it, so I went after it. And we have pictures of us in the Lutheran church. And I'm all smiles because my kids are getting baptized, and my husband looks like he's dying inside because he just pledged that he would raise them up in this, and he doesn't believe it at all. And you can see it in the pictures. And then comes Laura, and I was still just as determined to get Laura baptized. And we were going to a Methodist church at this time, so you can see this pattern with me keeps happening. As an adult with children, I'm still drawn to go to the church, but now I'm married to a man who isn't drawn to go to the church. And I have children, and I'm drawn to pull them with me, and he's not. And so you can see the strife and the problems that are arising in our life. And so Laura was baptized Methodist. Ian and Elizabeth were baptized Lutheran.
Not going to church ever.
No, we did go from time to time. Yeah, I would wake them up in the morning and ask them to go, and my husband wouldn't want to go, and I would take them some, and then some they would stay, and so it was a challenge. So our marriage is not a good marriage, and we decide, well, we'll just raise the children as good contributing citizens to the country, to the world, right? Without God. Not consciously me thinking without God, but that's what we'll do. And so we're very involved in our children's lives. We are very active in the school PTAs. My husband coached Little League for 12 years with our son and our other daughter, and then Laura played. We lived competition. We lived sports. We lived to do everything that probably the American dream was.
But the one thing that I will say is that they were always very involved in everything that we did.
Oh, everything. We wanted a family, a good family.
And that is one thing that my siblings had taken, even though they left the church. They took the fact that how they were raised, they were raising their children with being involved. Because they want to be the parents, the cool parents like my parents were with us.
Yeah, and actually our son just said that. Mom and Dad were always the cool parents. And our son is almost 40, and still grieving in his heart because he doesn't have us in his life anymore, yet he's walked away from us because we have God and he doesn't want God. And so it is ironic that they're raising their children just like we raised them. And so I covet your prayers for them. So I like to cook and I like to eat. Anybody here like to eat?
Yeah.
I like to eat. So what do people who have lots of problems usually do when they're feeling depressed, sad, happy? What do? They eat. Oh, and I ate. I was over 225 pounds, and I would eat when I was happy. I would eat when I was sad. I drowned in my sorrows in food. And so, at the height of my weight, I developed this gallbladder problem, and I had stones in my gallbladder, and I'd get these painful attacks and go into the hospital. It took them a while to figure out what it was. And so I ended up going to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor was very health conscious, and he suggested that I read this book by John Robbins called Diet for a New America. Have any of you heard that? Okay. It's written by John Robbins, who is the sole heir to Baskin Robbins ice cream. That's right. Yeah. And it is thick. It's a very thick book. And I read that book, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. I believe that anything that the FDA approved for us to eat was safe. Do you guys? You're smarter than I was. Yep, I believe that. And so we started some changes, and I started walking. That's what I did for exercise. Just walk. I walked in where we lived is a mile around our neighborhood, and it was either a mile downhill or half a mile downhill and half a mile uphill. You were almost always going up or down. And so I walked and walked and walked and walked, but I couldn't eat anything with fat in it. Because what would fat do to a gallbladder? Anybody know? Causes your gallbladder to produce bile, which causes pain when you have gallstones, because it causes the stones to move around. So I couldn't eat anything with fat in it, and so for a while, as long as I didn't eat anything with fat in it, I didn't have any gallbladder attacks. And so at this time, we decided to put our girls in a Lutheran school.
Just me.
Yeah. Oh, you first. Okay, then you're Elizabeth. Because we had decided to have our children be good contributing members to society, i.e. without God, which you can't do, we wanted to put them in the best academic school in the community, and that was a Lutheran school, even though we weren't Lutheran. And so we enrolled Laura at the Lutheran school. You're looking at me with fear.
No, if you're trying to just wondering.
Okay. And so we are here, and I remember walking around the neighborhood going, boy, I just don't know how this all fits. Good God, bad world, it's not as bad then as it is today. The whole thing that just happened in Las Vegas, absolutely terrible, right? Horrible. This man just killing for the sake of killing people. Unbelievable. The love of many well wax cold. We'll call sin righteousness and righteousness sin. And so I'm asking God as I'm walking up and down these hills, if you just show me what it is, I will tell everybody. Please just help me put it together. And so we put our daughter into the Lutheran School for academics, and guess what she found? She found God.
So basically, I started school there for the academia. And I had gone from public school into private school. And public school is very, very easy. No homework, nothing. Now I go into the Lutheran school, and I'm in 4th grade, and I have 4 hours of homework every single night. That was a big change. And I was also involved in all the sports and all the extracurricular activities. And I was coming home just working. My mom said, you know what, don't do your Bible homework. We don't really care about it. Anyways, that's not why you're there. So I was like, oh, great. That saves a lot of time, because they would have us memorize up to a chapter of the Bible a week in school. And so I wasn't doing my Bible homework, and that was saving me a lot of time, and I was doing really well in all of my classes except for Bible. And my teacher, it was his first year teaching, and he called us his little chickadees. And it was his mission to save us. And I have him to thank in a large part for my salvation. And I remember sitting in school, and in 4th grade, I was probably about 8 years old. And he was talking to us about how evil Halloween was, and how no Christian should celebrate Halloween. And he was talking to us about Santa Claus isn't real, and how that's make-believe, and you should never lie to your children, and about the Easter Bunny, and all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm heathen. I mean, I'm not here for religion. I'm like, what is this man doing? He said, I don't want you guys to believe deception, and I don't want you to believe that deception is right. And so I am here to give you truth. And my dad was working out of town. My dad often, while I was growing up in my later years, was working downstate, and we were living up north so that we would have the country home and not be living in the city. So he would work downstate during the week and come home on the weekends. And so my mom went to parent-teacher conferences alone, and you can share this part.
So, Mr. Dockery calls me in for a conference, and he's very concerned about Laura. And mind you, Laura and I had been sitting at the kitchen table and working on her homework all these extra hours, and we were very busy. The kids were on swim team, the kids were on ski team, the kids were on volleyball. We were very busy. And just to have 4 hours of homework a night, it just was like, this was grueling. And he sits me down and he says, Miss McKinley, I need to tell you I'm very concerned about Laura. And I'm like, why? Laura's doing excellent in all her classes. She has all A's. He says, oh, no, she's failing Bible. She has a D in Bible class. And I look at him, and today I just shuddered that I said this to him. I said, oh, that's okay. That doesn't matter. The academics is what's going to help Laura in her life. And he looked at me. He was heavily grieved at what I said. He knew I didn't have a clue of what it meant. And he said, Mrs. McKinley, if she doesn't have the academics, but she has God, he can help her. But if she doesn't have God and she has the academics, she's in a very dangerous place. That was so profoundly, I didn't understand that at all. But because of his sincerity, his deep concern, he didn't say it casually, he was genuinely concerned for Laura's life, her salvation. I said, okay, Mr. Dockery, I promise you we'll work on the Bible. So we began to work on the Bible, not because we believed that it was important, but because I didn't like Mr. Dockery feeling bad.
So that gave me a lot more homework every single night. But I praise the Lord because it's what saved me. And while I was there in 4th grade in that Lutheran school, he called for all of us to give our hearts to the Lord. And I did. And I believe without a shadow of doubt that that was why God had me in the Lutheran school, was because he knew that it was how God would use the people to save me. And I know salvation isn't in the Lutheran church, but God will use every little tool that he can to bring us to the truth that he knows that we will accept at that time.
And we're not asking for Seventh-day Adventists to put their children in Lutheran schools.
Well, we were heathen, so we didn't know anything. And so I accepted the Lord there, and it was amazing to me how much he invested in us kids. We had worships every week, and we would go to chapel, and before we would go into chapel, he would line us up in 2 rows. We were each in 2 rows, and we would say, this is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven, before we walked into the sanctuary doors. And let me tell you, Lutherans know reverence. And we were taught to reverence the sanctuary. We were taught to reverence the God that we serve. And we learned a lot there that helped us when we actually came to the truth in Adventism.
Yeah, and then over the course of Laura being there that year, I really wanted to join the church. And Ian was confirmed and Elizabeth was confirmed later, but we went through these confirmation classes. And it was very challenging again for my husband because he hadn't worked through any of this. And Pastor Nishan would come over and study with us, and it would be like a debate between he and my husband, this debate going back and forth. And I remember one time sitting at a table at the church, and I literally kicked my husband under the table because I just wanted him to be quiet. All I wanted to do was go to church, and he had all these questions that he needed answering, and they were just, in my mind, causing problems. And so as this condition with the gallbladder got worse and worse and worse. And I did end up losing the weight, as you can see, but I still had the gallbladder issue, and I had to have the gallbladder removed. And again, I was fearful of dying. And so at the Lutheran church, they have communion how they rotate it, and they have service Friday night, Saturday night, and twice on Sunday. And so they would have communion one week on Saturday evening, the next week they would have it on Sunday. And I found myself, the closer I kept to get to the surgery date, I was going for every communion, because I believed that somehow that would help save me. And I remember being on the gurney, being wheeled in just about for that surgery, and my family surrounding me and the pastor, and I'm just positive I'm not going to come alive.
She's saying all of her goodbyes to all of us kids. And we're sitting there like, Mom, you're going to come out. It's really not that big of a deal. And she's just determined in her mind that she thinks she's not going to come back.
But as a reality, I think it is a big deal, because it's a battle of good and evil. And I could have very easily died on that table and I would have been lost, because I didn't know Jesus. I didn't have a clue about what it was. And the Lord in His mercy spared my life, and I came out of that surgery to learn more about Him and His truth later.
And so we had an interesting introduction to the health message. This was before we were Adventists. This was while we were still Lutheran, going to the Lutheran church. And I came home from school one day and I got off the bus, and our bus stop was right at the bottom of a really big hill, and our house was on the top of the hill. And so I was hungry, I got off the bus, ran up the hill, ran into the house, and our house was always stockpiled with food. I can never remember a day in my life where my mom wasn't always making sure there was tons of food in our house. We were never going to go hungry. And I opened up the cupboards to get some food, and they were empty. And I was like, shocked. I probably yelled through the house, Mom, where in the world did all the food go? And she said something, and I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't know what the word really was, but all I knew is that now all of the food that I had once eaten was now gone. And that word was hydrogenated oil.
And those things were like Ritz crackers, Triscuits, wheat thins, Bisquick.
Everything we ate had hydrogenated oils in it. And so that was kind of my introduction. I remember we were like, everything has that? What in the world is that? And I don't remember. For a long time, I had no idea what it was. I just knew that it meant I could eat anything that I was used to eating anymore.
Remember, I lost over 125 pounds. 100 pounds. I don't know how much I was over 225 because I stopped getting on the scale. I had clothes in my closet from size 4 to size 22. So whatever weight I was, I had something to wear. But so over the course of this year, while we were at the school, I kept changing. I kept walking. All I did for exercise, walk. Not eat fat and change what I was eating. I read the book Diet for New America. And I asked God to show me how things fit together. We don't go to an Adventist church yet, but we know a Seventh-day Adventist.
And so my mom stopped eating pretty much anything with fat, a lot of animal products, those things, and she was making 2 meals for a long time because there was no reason behind it other than the fact that it wasn't the best and she couldn't eat it without pain.
And I seem to have this principle before I came into the church that if I know that it's not good for me, we didn't finish it, we threw it away.
It all went in the garbage.
Yeah.
So then when I had an experience in 6th grade, so I went to Lutheran school, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. And in 6th grade, my 4th grade teacher went with us to 5th grade because he loved us so much. He decided he was staying with us for 2 years. But they wouldn't let him to switch to 6th grade because the 6th grade teacher wasn't going to budge. So I got a new teacher in 6th grade, and she decided to go around the classroom and ask everybody who was the most Christian person that we knew. And they all knew I did not come from a Christian home, and that I didn't have a church background, and that there was the only place that I had really learned anything I knew about God. And so as they're going around my classroom and they're asking us who's the most Christian person that we know, one person's name came to mind. And interestingly enough, it was a Seventh-day Adventist. And we had been introduced to this gentleman when I was 5. I'm now 10. And when we were 5 years old, as I said, my parents were always very involved in everything that us children did. And my dad, we moved to where we lived to do, he was the treatment and program director of a
Residential substance abuse facility.
Yeah. So he did a lot of that. And there was this gentleman who was also working in the community for drug and alcohol awareness prevention. And so my dad connected with him, and he was Seventh-day Adventist, and they were doing a program called Listen America. And we very quickly started working together with him, my parents and us children did. And we became volunteer of the years. We were doing everything and anything that he needed help with to help raise money and do drug and alcohol prevention. Because even though I was not raised in a Christian home, there was never alcohol in our home. And my parents wanted to teach us children that you could have fun without drinking. And so we were not raised with alcohol. And there were a lot of ways that God was teaching my parents principles that he had, even though we didn't go to church. And so this man, I had watched him go through kidney cancer. He lost a kidney. I watched him go through loss, and somehow it impacted my very young mind. And so when my teacher came to me and asked who's the most Christian person that I knew, I said this gentleman's name. And she looked at me kind of perplexed because it wasn't a name that she recognized. And they all knew that my churching experience was there. And she said to me, she said, Laura, where does he go to church? I said, oh, he's Seventh-day Adventist. And I actually knew. And her jaw dropped. And she's like, oh, can I talk to you after school today? And generally, to me, that was really exciting because I loved going to the principal's office because it generally meant I got to do something exciting. And so it was normally a very good thing to get called aside by the teachers. I loved school. And so after school that day, before I got on the school bus, she and my 4th and 5th grade teacher pulled me aside and they said, Laura, we really need to talk to you. And as good, concerned teachers would do, they had a real heart-to-heart conversation with me and told me I needed to stay away from Seventh-day Adventists because they weren't Christians and they were actually a cult. And even though I was taught to be a very respectful child, I did not have a problem asking questions. And so I asked them, I said, why do you say that? I mean, I knew that he said he was Christian. And they said, well, for 2 reasons. 1, they don't believe in Jesus. And 2, they don't eat meat. And I thought in my little mind, I know he talks about Jesus. And how does being a vegetarian make somebody a cult?
He talks about Jesus so much that in our home, we didn't take the Lord's name in vain when we were talking in common day, everyday conversation. We would say, oh my gosh, or geez. And it so bothered him when we said those 2 words. One day he asked me, he says, can you give me a dictionary? I'm like, sure. So I got my dictionary. So we looked up gosh, he said, look this up in that dictionary. I did. He said, slang for God. I'm like, oh. Then I looked up geez, and it's slang for Jesus. He says, every time you say that, it hurts God and it hurts Jesus. Because you're using their names common. And it was just like, whoop, right over my head. I was like, wow. And I certainly didn't want to hurt them, even though I didn't really know them. But I just don't like to hurt people. Unless I'm really angry at them and I think they hurt me first, then I just seem to hurt them. But normally, if they haven't hurt me, I don't want to hurt them. And so he was very conscientious about those little things and showed us why those things weren't good to say.
So I was very distraught, and I went home from school, and I walked up the big hill and went into the house, and I was normally very happy when I came home from school. I loved it. And my mom greeted me at the door, and she asked me what was going on, and I told her what had happened at school today, and her response was she called George and wanted to talk to him about everything that had happened at school. And so he came over, and he studied with us, and long story short, we went to church that Sabbath. And my poor father, he came home from working all week, and he went to go start a load of laundry, and my mom said, wait, stop, we don't do that anymore. And he was like, we don't wash clothes anymore? And she's like, no, not tonight. We're not doing it tonight. And he's like, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. So he goes and he turns on the TV. Wait, we don't do that anymore. And my dad's like, what? We don't do laundry. We don't watch TV. I'm just going to go to bed. So as he's in bed, my mom's like, oh, and we're going to church in the morning. And my dad, who used to ironically pray that the alarm would go off for church, was like, tomorrow?
She's got the wrong day.
It's Saturday. And she's like, yeah, we're going to try George's church. Even though George actually goes to the church we go to now, but because we've moved. but his church was an hour away from where we lived. And so my mom had actually arranged for us to go to church, and then as we're going to church, she had to convince the three children that we were going to church on a Saturday rather than Sunday.
Ian was gone.
And so it was just my sister and I. And then as we're driving to church, she informed us that we're actually starting for the Bible study first, and then church, and then we're going to the pastor's house for lunch afterwards. My dad is a very go-with-the-flow type personality. And he's like, oh, he wasn't very impressed, but what are you going to do?
I was like, you're kidding.
So we walk into the church, and mind you, Lutheran, there's a lot of formality, there's a lot of ceremonies. And the pastor is dressed in a robe, and based on the color of the cloth around, you can tell what season it is. You know what I mean? If it's Lent, or if it's the different colors, all have different meanings. There's all these different things in the sanctuary that all have a lot of rituals and meanings. So we go to the Adventist church, and it's very plain. And we walk in.
Elizabeth, our 16-year-old then, we're sitting in the pew, and we're waiting, and she taps my husband on the shoulder and says, "Where's the pastor? Because there's nobody dressed in robe." And he says, "I think it's the man over there in the suit." And Elizabeth goes, "Pastor in a suit? Really?"
And so as we walked in, they were giving a health message. And I remember the person standing up there, and it was amazing to my mom, because what they were preaching was exactly how she was living. And I was like, wow, these people teach everything I've been learning. And she was immediately engaged. And then communion was our first Sabbath, which was kind of a unique experience for people with the foot washing communion and everything. That was just very interesting coming from a Lutheran background. So then we go to the pastor's house, and we're having Bible study. And my dad is very analytical. Very logical, very analytical. I remember I was in Lutheran school, and my dad was not a Bible-believing Christian, but he told me, he said, "Laura, quote to me the 10 Commandments." And I quoted them to him. He said, "Now go read your Bible, and go read the 10 Commandments." And I said, "Dad, they're different." He said, "Go ask your teacher." So I went to school, because the commandments that we learned in the Lutheran church were the Catholic's commandments, because we learned from the Luther's catechism. And he said, "Okay, Laura," before he sent me to school the next day, he said, "Go to Revelation, go to the end of it, and you see how it says anybody who takes away from these words will be taken away in salvation, anybody who adds to them, you know." And I was like, oh. Because I had so believed everything my teachers had taught me, that it was like, how does this work? So I went to school, and I asked my teachers, I said, I had a question in Bible class. I said, "My dad had me read the 10 Commandments from the Bible yesterday, and they're different than what you taught us." And my teacher kind of stared at me for a minute, and she said, "Oh, it doesn't matter." And I said, "But my dad also showed me this verse in Revelation." I know my dad doesn't follow the Bible. But I said, "He showed me this verse in Revelation, but the commandments are different. How does that work?" I said, "Oh, you're thinking too hard. It really doesn't matter." And so my dad was very analytical, and he had a lot of these things that in Christianity and different denominations just didn't make sense.
And while we were at the Lutheran church, Tim was riding home from work. He would work in Detroit during the week and then come back on the weekends. He worked Monday through Thursday. And the Lutheran church is desperately afraid of works. Desperately afraid of works. And there were never any Bibles in the pews. Nobody ever came to church with a Bible. And it was very cold and formal. And so he believed that the Lord gave him a program to help engage the members of the church and help them grow spiritually. And he shared it with the Lutheran church, but they didn't want anything to do with it, because Tim creates curriculum programs, and he's a program and design engineer. And so he was all excited finally about something that God revealed to him, and the church didn't want it at all. So our first Sabbath, the Sabbath school teacher is up there talking about a changed life, about a growth, a process, picking up your cross and carrying it and changing. and new heart. And so that engaged my husband intellectually right away, and being very analytical about the Bible and what you were reading. And the health message engaged me, and the children just liked the people because everybody was really friendly.
And it was interesting to us because everybody had a Bible. They didn't actually use the Bibles that were in the pew. They had their own.
Yep.
It was like, these people actually bring a Bible to church?
And they knew hymns by the number. They wouldn't look at the hymnal and say the name of the hymn. Let's do 575. And we're like, wow, what's 575?
And they all knew.
Yeah.
We're like, wow, these people don't just come and sit.
No. And they opened their Bibles, and I didn't know anything. I tried to read the Bible so many times, but I couldn't get beyond the begats. And so I'd pick up the Bible, and I kind of like fan through it, looking at the books of the Bible until I got to the book that we were going to. And they were very kind, and they waited. But we didn't know anything. So we just dropped in that church.
We literally just walked in. And so the pastor and my parents were talking, and the pastor was actually very wise. He invited a family to come who had 3 children about us children's ages. And so they came to the meeting, or to the lunch and the study as well. And my dad decided to ask the same questions to them as he had asked at every other church we had tried church hopping to. Because there was a stage in my life where I think we went to a different Sunday evening church just about every week, because Mom always wanted to go to church. And so my dad was asking these people these questions that nobody had ever been able to answer. And for the first time, they had logical answers from the Bible.
Yeah, they'd say, oh, you need Jesus, you need Jesus. And my husband said, I don't need Jesus, I just go straight to God. And nobody could answer that. Faith Reformed couldn't answer that. Methodist couldn't answer that. Lutheran couldn't answer that. Today, Tim can answer that.
And so it was amazing how God used the questions in my dad's mind about how illogical Christianity was to keep us from settling in a lot of these churches. Because my mom just wanted to go to church, but my dad's like, this has to make sense.
Oh, I didn't care about the history. I just knew good people went to church. And I just wanted to be a good person, so I want to go to church.
And so with my dad's analytical mind, the Adventist message is truth. And truth will make sense. And truth is logical. You can follow it from here to there, and it works. I mean, I remember as a little girl when I was in Lutheran school, my grandfather passed away. And I drew this picture. I actually just found it the other week, because we're in the middle of moving right now. My poor dad has to finish moving since we didn't finish before we came. And I found this picture that I had drawn, and it was of my grandpa up in heaven, and us down here on the earth crying, with a question mark, how can he be happy watching all of us here grieving? It doesn't make sense. Even as a little child, I knew there's something wrong with this belief. Because when they teach that you go to heaven right when you die, and when they teach that it's all heaven and glory up there, and there's no sadness, no pain, no nothing, but they also teach that they're watching us down here, how can you be happy when you're not watching all the sin that's here? And so praise the Lord, truth makes sense. And so we started going to church every single Sabbath.
Actually, we closed Sabbath with them. Very long day. We were all smiling at the end. My husband was one of these who read a lot of science fiction. And science tells you that, well, at one point we're going to get to a point where if you got a disease, they can just deep freeze you. And then when they get a cure for the disease, they can thaw you out. You'll be cured from the disease and you keep living. And he was actually telling these people that was really enticing to him. And again, I'm sitting at a table with him and I'm wanting to kick him, but he's not close enough to me. Just please stop this conversation. But they were able to work with him and say, oh, Tim, that wouldn't be good. That would be terrible to live forever in this sinful world. And he was like, oh, I just love this world. And they're like going, this world is terrible. And I'm just like watching both of them like a tennis match. But they were able to answer his questions, and we never went back to the Lutheran Church.
And so we continued going Sabbath after Sabbath after Sabbath, and it was amazing how the Lord transformed our lives. Now I will tell you that I was still in the Lutheran school, and every Monday morning we would do Sunday school attendance and church attendance. So we would get to church, or we get to school, and they say, because we got graded on our church attendance. And they said, did you go to Sunday school? Did you go to church? Did you go to both? And my attendance was pathetic. beforehand. I mean, absolutely pathetic. I always loved going to Sabbath or Sunday school and church. It was where I went to school, and it was with my friends and my teachers, and it was just great. But we rarely ever went. And now all of a sudden my attendance is perfect, and I'm never there. And my teacher asked me, she said, "Where are you going to church? Because you're not going here." And I was like, "Oh, we're going to the Seventh-day Adventist church." And that was my last year going to school there.
You can't send the Seventh-day Adventists to a Lutheran school.
Especially when they're trying to tell you it's a cult and you need to stay away. And so the Lord continued to grow us and grow us and grow us. And it was amazing because every single Sabbath for a year we spent with that family. We'd go to church, we'd come home, we would eat, we would go for a walk, and then we'd study. And we studied and we studied and we studied. And it wasn't just the parents who were studying. All of us kids would sit there with our Bibles, going through, flipping here and flipping there. It was mine. It was not just my parents' religion. It was my own. And I love the fact that they made us go through every single verse, that we knew this was the truth. And when I was in that Lutheran school for the next 4 months, I knew what I was being taught was from the Bible and the Bible alone. It wasn't just some man's theory. And so 6 months later, my parents and I were baptized. And my sister, she ended up getting baptized about 3 months later. And then my brother ended up getting baptized a year later. And as my mom said, unfortunately, they both left. We were very, very new. My brother left because of associations. And my sister ended up leaving for the same thing.
And we believed what we were learning was true and that the Bible was true. You can't argue with prophecy. But we really didn't know Jesus. And I wouldn't still encourage anybody to wait till you know Jesus to come. Because once you know something's true, you really need to follow it because it is true. And then trust in the Lord to bring the rest around. And so we didn't know how to help our older two, really, with knowing Jesus. And I mean, my son would say, "I pray all the time, Mom, and he doesn't hear me, he doesn't answer me." And not even knowing that the Bible is the Word of God, that He's answering us through the Word. It's not face to face. Because He can't step out of the Holy of Holies and come see us today. He just can't. And so we didn't have the knowledge to be able to help, really. Even though we tried to surround them with the best of friends. I learned very early on that rebellious Seventh-day Adventist children were the most dangerous children to my children coming into the church. And we actually did pull Laura and Elizabeth from the Lutheran school.
She was still back. She was back.
She was back already. And Laura went to the public school.
Because that's what people did who were in the church.
And we homeschooled.
Nope. We went to public for 2 years.
And then
homeschooled.
Okay.
So basically, after that, we didn't know what to do, and there was a church school around, but it was very small. And the family who brought us into the church, they went to public school. So if that's what they do, then why can't we too? And after 3 years in the Lutheran school, that was highly, highly spiritual and biblically based. It was a big shock to go into a public school.
And Laura would come home and say, "I miss God. There's no God there. There's no prayer. I really miss God in the school." For the first year, she really noticed a difference and she missed God.
And I made it kind of a missionary venture. I was in science class, and most of us know they teach in science classes in secular schools. And so we had to do assignments. And oh boy, was that fun when they were trying to teach evolution and you had to answer what the Big Bang Theory was and prove evolution, and I was just going after creation and everything. And I remember we had to do a report on the constellations, and I picked the Orion. And I decided I was going to tell everybody where heaven was, and I was going to preach to them salvation, and my teacher wrote on my paper, A+, very unique study. I mean, it was very unique because they hadn't experienced somebody who was there trying to be a missionary in all of their academia. But the second year, I was back with my friends who I knew before we became Christian, and little by little, association has its way of creeping into your life. And the more that you surround yourself with an environment, the more that environment affects you. And so my first year, I did not like it there. I mean, I was very involved in the sports and student council and all the activities, but I really missed God. My second year was more like I was part with my friends like I used to be when I was in elementary school. And I didn't miss God so much because where are you most of the hours of the day? In school.
And mind you, we had a person come to our community who was working on restoring an old train and making it a dinner train. And he came to church one Sabbath, and he didn't have a place to live, and it was short term, and we said, sure, you can stay at our house. And when he left, he bought us a series of books, 9 volumes. Anybody know what those books are? Testimonies. You ever heard of testimonies for the church? Y'all read the testimonies for the church? Raise your hand. You don't raise your hand, start reading testimonies for the church. There'll be things in there that you won't, well, maybe in your church you'll hear them preached here, probably, but we weren't hearing them preached. And so things were, we were reading those things, and the family that brought us into church believed in Nalani as a prophet. And it was a blessing to us.
It was probably the biggest gift that they ever gave to us. Even though we learned later that they didn't follow Ellen White, they taught us to believe everything she said. And God blinded us to the fact that they didn't follow her. And you know, we learned from very, very early on, she's a prophet, and what she says, you do.
And if we came into the church believing that she was a prophet, and if we didn't do what she said to do, we're not listening. The Bible says, oh man.
If you don't listen to the voice of Christ,
Isaiah 20:20, when they listen not to the prophet, they listen not to me, God. And so if we changed everything to come to hear, and the prophet's not the prophet, we might as well go back to keeping Sunday. Or we need to change what we're doing because it's God that's asking us to do that, not the church, not people.
So it's been an interesting journey. Obviously, everybody knows that the baptism is the birth, not the graduation. And with the health message, my mom already had a connection with it beforehand because she pretty much had the health message before we even joined the church. The rest of us did not. We still ate anything and everything, and except for hydrogenated and
Not in the house.
not in the house. No, not at home. And it was interesting how the Lord took that passion of hers for health and then connected her with the health ministries leader, and we started doing trainings. We started doing CHIP trainings, so we went out and we were trained to be certified as CHIP instructors, and we started doing things in the church. And as the health message started growing on her and growing on us, it was not so much a battle for my mom, but it was a lot more of a battle for us children.
I'm a black and white person. And if it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And you either do it, and it's not good to not do what's wrong.
And it was very hard because I didn't understand a lot of it. And I had a neighbor down the road who, he knew that my parents were changing a lot, and he would feed my sister and I the things that we won't get at home. And so we would go down there, and he actually didn't have any relationship with my parents, and so there was no real risk of them knowing what we were doing.
Just people.
And so my conscience was always pretty sensitive, and so at some point I decided I can't do this. I need to be honest with myself and with God, and if this is wrong, I need to not do it. And so I remember going down to his house, and he had made me my favorite meal, and I said, I'm not eating it. And he's like, well, why? I said, because I can't do this anymore. I know it's not right, and I know my mom won't approve of it, and I can't do it. Well, the next time we were going door to door some months later, and my mom knocked on his door, and he joyfully told her that he always used to feed us girls things that we were never allowed to eat at home.
I can imagine my heart. Knocking on his door, going with the young lady, they're going off to Turkey to do ministry in a few months, and we're asking them if they have anything that we can pray for them for. And he says, oh, I don't have anything for you to pray for. I just want to let you know that your girls come down here, and I feed them all the things that you won't. And my heart just sank. I was like, whoa. That was terrible.
Yeah.
And so for her it was a lot easier. And it is an interesting journey. And I remember there's been a few things that the Lord has had to kind of tell me, okay, are you willing? Are you willing to give this up? Because you have to look, and one thing I always appreciated about my parents, whenever they made a change, they always challenged us to study it. And they said, go to the Bible, go to Spirit of Prophecy, and if you can prove us wrong, we will change. But if you can't, then this is the house rule. And I appreciated that a lot because it grounded me.
Amen.
Because it wasn't just some arbitrary rule that they were putting on us children. They said, no, the reason why we are doing what we are doing is because we believe from reading the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy is this is how our home needs to be ordered. And we do not believe that we can have you under our roof knowledgeably going against what we believe God is asking us to do under our roof.
Amen.
And so go and study it. I studied myself out of my worldly music that way. I studied myself out of a lot of things that way.
Well, because we had a pastor that was, those things were okay with him. We had taken off the jewelry, and he had said to us, if jewelry doesn't interfere with your walk with God, then you don't have to take it off.
So we put it back on.
If contemporary Christian music doesn't interfere with your walk with God, you can listen to it.
So why give it up?
If movies don't interfere with your walk with God and competition, then you can do it. You know, we didn't know what a walk with God was. So it didn't seem to interfere with it. And most of the people were doing it, just so we didn't do it. But the testimonies rebuked all of those things. God rebuked those things. And the dress, let me tell you, the diet was easy. The dress was hard. Because I lost all of this weight. 100 pounds, you know. I used to wear things to cover up how I looked. Now I could wear things that revealed how I looked. And that felt really nice. And we went to Huge Pines one time when Laura was a student down there. And I knew where I was going. I knew this was a very conservative place. For some reason, I had a rebellious heart, and I took pants. And I wore them to church at Huge Pines. Who would do that, right? So this gentleman, he calls me out on it. He says, sister, can I talk with you? I'm like, certainly. He says, ma'am, do you know the council about dress? I just looked at him, and he says, you're not to show the form of your body. And he kept going on, and he was very kind. And I just thanked him. And Laura, how did you react to that?
I was so upset with him. I thought he had no right to talk to my mother that way. She was fine.
But I wasn't fine. I wasn't fine at all. So my wardrobe, as I'm reading, and then later as Laura's reading, she comes downstairs, she's reading volume 2 of the testimony, she says, I'm convinced I'll never wear boots. Boots, I will never wear them. I guess she talks a lot about boots. Nobody wears boots today. And so my journey with dress reform was I took the pants, and I put them all in a drawer. I took them off the hangers, but I put them in a drawer. That was the first step. And then the second step was take the pants, put them in a box in the garage. Second step. Third step, somebody said, well, you could at least sell them. I'm like, oh, I don't want to make money on something women aren't supposed to wear. I threw them away. So we got rid of them. But that was the hardest journey. But let me tell you, I noticed right away that men start calling you ma'am. And sometimes ma'am sounds like Pam, and I think, how do they know my name? Can I open that door for you, ma'am? But men treat you more like a lady when you dress like a lady. But if you dress like a lady of the night, they're going to look at you and treat you like a lady of the night.
I don't know where we went with that one. Okay, so it is an interesting walk with the Lord, isn't it? I can only imagine if the moment that we stepped in the Adventist Church's doors, if we knew everything that God was going to lead us into. But God is merciful and He takes us and He says, okay, are you willing to follow? Let's go here. And He says, okay, you're there? Are you willing to follow me? Now go here. And the Lord takes us as far and as fast as our heart of surrender will go.
And in the last days, we're told that people will learn in a very short time what it took others to learn in a lifetime. And you can't run with the horses if you don't walk with the footmen. So when light comes, we have to walk in it. And we don't have much time anymore. I don't want to encourage anyone to linger in anything that God is calling us to do as a people. And we ladies will look all similar when we won't be stumbling blocks to our brothers or each other, because women don't have permission to look at other women's parts of their bodies either, do they? And so it's distracting when women dress immodestly, and even men these days.
And so it's an interesting thing, you know. We're talking about staying in the church, because honestly, to be quite frank with you, I'm the only one in the church still with the children that I was raised with. We came into the church when I was 10, and I am now 31, and nobody else is still Adventist.
They don't even hint to being there, though.
And I have had to ask myself that through my growing up years, I saw one friend go and another friend go and another friend go. Why? Did they not know? Oh no, they knew. A lot of them knew the Bible better than I did. A lot of them had had it from birth. I didn't have it from then. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why are so many young people leaving? And you know, it's different for every person, and I'm not going to say, I mean, we know exactly how, or I've arrived, because obviously I still have my struggles every day. But I know there were a few factors. Number one, I was involved. I knew the Bible. And I knew that the Bible said that this church is the church.
Amen.
I knew that no matter what happens inside this church or outside this church, this is the church.
Amen.
I knew that this is the ark. There's nowhere else to go.
Amen.
I mean, I remember hearing a sermon once, it's like, no matter how bad it got on the ark, did Noah ever think it was getting off?
No.
That's this church. Does that mean that it was easy in the ark? No. And I knew that not because of what I had heard, but because I knew from studying the Bible that God prophesied this church to exist. And that was mine. That was not my parents'. Because I sat through as a 10 and 11-year-old, going through the Bible and flipping through to know, am I really going to change every single component of my life? My brother and I were talking the other week, and he said, Lord, nothing in your life is how we were raised. Nothing. He was 18. He said, I live how we were raised, except for one component. He said, I live that. You guys don't. You change everything. And let me tell you, you don't change everything just because of a win. We had fun. Our life, I mean, yeah, there were trials, but I liked our life. But when you study the Bible and you see that the Bible says this is what you should do and this is what you should not do in order to have that walk with me, you don't really have a choice but to follow if you want to love God.
Amen.
And so you look at it and you say, okay, in every component, whether it be, am I now going to keep Sabbath? I remember the last hot dog that I ate, and I remember thinking to myself, no more. Now that might seem strange to those that were raised Adventists and never ate it, but when that's what you eat all the time, you have to sit there and think, God, are you really asking me to do this? And when we know, yes, this is what God is asking us to do, there's only one option if we really love God. When it comes to what am I going to spend my time doing? If God gives us a principle, if we love Him, there really is no other way. And I think to myself, okay, I knew it. It was mine. A lot of my friends, a lot of people who were raised in it was their parents. They knew it intellectually, but they never had an experiential walk with God. Number two, associations. My parents were very, very careful with my associations. I complained all the time because I had no friends except for my mom's friends. Because there were no young people in my church that were safe for me to be around. And she said, Flora, be thankful you have them. I'm like, they're my mom's age. They're not my age. There's no fun. And God took me through a period in my life where I had to get to where I was content to have no friends than to have bad friends.
Amen.
And once I got there, He gave me friends. I was like, man, I wish I would have learned this sooner.
Amen.
Associations are huge for children. It's so critical to find like-minded associations, not just for children, but for young adults too. I didn't get those like-minded friends until I was 17. It took a while, but I got them. And let me tell you, they were a huge, tremendous support. You can't lean on them, but they are a tremendous support.
Laura was a very social person, I'm sure you can see that. And our other daughter was social as well. And we sent Elizabeth to, after it wasn't working at the public school, we pulled the girls from the public school because there was no God there. And we homeschooled. Our oldest daughter was her senior year. She just liked to die. And so the last half of the senior year, we sent her to the boarding academy. I would caution anybody to never send their children to any boarding academy. They're too young to send away. And speaking with Calvin Thrash a few years ago, y'all know who he is? I asked, he said, I'm so glad to see Laura still in the church. I said, what do you attribute to all these people leaving? He says, they leave home way too soon. Keep your children home till they're in their 20s. They are not ready to go out in the world alone. So Laura went off to this program, Witness for Life, and she went to UT Pines, and she went over to Europe. She came home and worked for ASI, and her prayer was,
Anywhere but home.
anywhere but home.
I went to Mission College with evangelism and Pastor Torres. He still to this day would send me anywhere in the world. And I told the Lord, I said, I'll go anywhere but home. Please do not send me home. I want to go be a missionary, and I want to do amazing things for you in far off places.
And where did the Lord bring you?
The Lord knew I needed to grow up still.
So he sent her home, and Tim and I are seeing all these Adventist children, Laura's age, and they're just as worldly or worldlier than the non-Adventists that we left. And I'm like going, Laura's coming home. Laura's not going off to the
And
typical
I was an
Adventist
obedient
route.
child, and I came home kicking and screaming.
She did. She was that prodigal's brother that stayed home. Her heart wasn't there, but she was there physically. And so we endured it, and now her heart is here.
Just took a while. And I think also one thing that really helped was my parents got me involved very young. It wasn't just this is what we're doing, you sit in the pew and watch. And with the health message, that was the main way that I was involved. When my mom was teaching, I always had a role. From 11 years old, I always had a role to be involved.
To the point where I put her so much in the forefront now, I almost don't have anything to do. It's just Laura.
And so I remember the first role that I had that I was actually nervous about was we were doing a chip training program. And they had this little bear. And it used to be in the program that whoever got the most miles got the bear. But we didn't want them to be competing against each other, so whoever got the least miles got the bear to encourage them.
And the lady and I went back and forth on this, and I said, we're not supposed to be competing. Why do we want the people to compete about each other? But it's a good thing, Emily. It's still competition. Let's have it be the encourager bear.
And so I was the one responsible for going around and counting up the miles from every table and seeing who got the least, and they got the bear. And I had to go up front and do that. And I remember being terrified. And I was so nervous about doing it. I just didn't know what to do with myself. But little by little, I got more roles, and then I was helping with the cooking classes. And I would be teaching this component, or I'd be demonstrating this, or I'd be passing out this. And that really helped because then the mission of the church was also mine. I had the doctrine, and now the mission and the outreach and the evangelism was mine. And so you have to make it an experiential walk with God. I went to the Mission College of Evangelism, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I knew David Asher very well. He was a very dear friend, and I knew the Rosario brothers and Matt Minikis and Matt Parr and that whole group. And they took us into their wings about, 16 or 17 years ago. They took us under their wing and they said, you need to go there. I was 16 years old, so I guess it was 15 years ago. And they said, you need to go to Mission College. I said, I don't know what that is. They said, you need to go. So I dropped out of high school 2 weeks before my senior year and flew off to Mission College knowing nothing.
It wasn't that easy, though, because these families, these young people, they came and they stayed in our home. We saw incredible fruit. How many people know David Ashrick or know of David Ashrick in this room? Okay. When we met him right at the very beginning of his journey, pretty much in Seventh-day Adventism.
He wasn't known of anybody when we met him.
Nope. He actually had come to Michigan to do, ASI was doing work there, an evangelistic crusade, and he was a preacher. And we went to hear him preach, and he had every one of us engaged. We were like, wow, I can see why the disciples would travel around and hear John the Baptist preach or hear Paul preach. It was something different than we had not seen before.
It was the first time I actually remember being engaged when a preacher was preaching.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and I'm like, where's my Bible? I really want, I need to follow. I need to take notes. This is amazing to see the Bible come alive. Because so often you have pastors who preach and it's just like, you fall asleep because it's dull. There's no life and excitement to the Word of God.
No practicality to it. So these people, we met them, and they came to our home. They stayed in our home. I watched the fruit of these people, the discipline, the love for Jesus. And that's why we decided to let Laura drop out, a 4.0 student, drop out of school, and go off to Mission College for 3-month training. And let me tell you, my mother-in-law and my mom, they all thought we lost our mind.
I was the one who was going to be the academia one in the family.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one that dropped out of high school, but I'm the only one who graduated from college, too. So we went there, and it was amazing to me. I remember thinking, I am going to mission college. I know so much of the Bible. And we had this Bible game, and I was like, I will be the spokesperson because I know my Bible.
She wasn't quite humble yet.
No, I was humbled afterwards when I knew nothing. They said, okay, the first question, who can quote the three angels' message from memory? I'm like, where is it? I knew nothing. I was humbled very, very quickly. But I learned there, Pastor Torres has a heart for gaining the heart of people. It's not so much the intellect. He wants your heart.
Amen.
And that man invested in the 31 of us because he wanted to make sure that not only were we equipped knowledgeably, but he wanted our hearts. And I learned there the amazing message that we have and how to defend it to others. We had,
Even though we knew the doctrine, didn't know how to defend it to others. And that's essential. And it's equally as essential that you are abiding in the truth. We have to, at some point, be obedient to everything that God is asking us to be in order for him to reveal more light and to work powerfully. Like Paul is saying that forget the word that he used, the evidence of his calling is the fruit of the people that are coming to his messages. And so your church is an example of that, and your pastor, because this is a reasonably young church, isn't it? How old is this church? How many years? 14? Okay, so how have you been growing in numbers? Let me tell you, I heard last night a statistic about your church. You have more people attending church than you have on the books. Do you know that's flipped of Seventh-day Adventists? They almost always have more people on the books in North America, thank you, than they have attending the church. But that's not true with the Sunday-keeping churches. The Sunday-keeping churches are like yours. They have more people attending than are on the books. You guys are doing something right.
so, we go through and we see the Lord track our course of history. And it's amazing because if you look back and you see, okay, Lord, this is how you led. This is how you intervened. This is how you led our lives. And so then I come home, and I didn't want to be home. I was gone for a year. And as my mom said, I went to Mission College of Evangelism. I went to UT Pines, and they gave us their year-long program in 3 months, which was very intense but amazing. Then I went to the European Bible School in Norway. Then I Bible worked for ASI in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then I reluctantly came home. And the Lord knows that there's a lot of character development to be done. And one of the best places that can happen is in your home. Because your parents know you better than just about anybody else, and they're not going to just gloss over any needs that you have to work on in your character. And so we started teaching. And I actually reluctantly started doing things at home because I was sure that God was going to send me somewhere.
Exciting.
Somewhere exciting, which home was not. And I'm still home. Years later. But it's amazing to be able to see how God created the family for a reason, didn't he? He created it because he knows it's the best way that we can develop a Christ-like character. And so I was not raised with the Lord. Thankfully, the Lord intervened, and he brought us in, and he brought me in with my parents. We always used to say, and I remember my parents saying countless times, how they wish they could have done it and raised us children knowing God. Because I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that if my brother had been raised knowing the Lord, that's how he would live. My sister's a different story, but my sister's the one who, please pray for her, because her daughter, she left. She believes the doctrine of the church. I don't know if any of you watched annual council this last week. They did a statistic. And most of the people that leave the Adventist church do not leave because of doctrinal issues. They still leave believing that we have the truth. And that's my sister. She believes that it's the truth. She doesn't want to live it. And her little girl is God's way of trying to reach her heart. And that little girl, I can't do this so much with Ken. I feel more privileged to do this with my sister's children. But every time we would have her little girl, I would sing to her all the Bible songs, I'd read to her all the Bible stories, and talk to her about Jesus, and she would go home and she would tell her mommy. And her mommy wasn't very thrilled with me.
These little babies in your arms, these young ones, do you know what you can do with them? Oh, their minds are so pliable. Sing to them hymns. Sing to them scripture songs. And do you know what they'll be doing before they can speak words and sentences? They'll be humming songs. They'll be doing it because it's all they know in their mind. We did that. We saw that happen with Ashton's little boys, Landon and Jabel. I remember being so odd. These boys could hum scripture songs and hymns before they could speak words. And so I thought, wow, that's absolutely amazing. So we did that with Nalani. And guess what? It worked with her too. She was humming scripture songs and hymns before she could talk. And it was amazing.
So God sometimes gives you a surprising answer to your prayer. When you say, oh, I wish I could have raised a child with the Lord, sometimes He actually answers that in a unique way. And so, 18 years after I was born, we were blessed with the biggest blessing ever. I am not the emotional one in the family. And so, we were actually able to try everything that we had learned with her. And you know what? It's amazing because it works. I mean, I used to tell myself, I was kind of glad I wasn't raised Adventist because I saw all these kids who were raised Adventist walk away because it wasn't their own. But for me, it was mine. I knew why I didn't do everything that I did.
But
Because
we knew
studied
it
it.
can't be a disadvantage to be raised Adventist, right? It's got to be an advantage. It's got to be the best because it's God's prescribed way. So what's happening?
And so with her, we were able to do it from a young child. Be very careful what you put in their mind because what you put in comes out. And it was amazing to me because generally when you hear children and they're having idle time and they're really quiet, you don't hear anything, a lot of times people would wonder, oh no, what mischief are they getting into? But with Nalani, we learned, what is she doing? With excitement. I remember one time it was really, really quiet upstairs and we were busy and we walked upstairs kind of tiptoeing to look. She had my blue blanket and it was on the floor. She got a laundry basket and she got some type of a stick and she had lined up all of her stuffies and she was a missionary going down the Amazon River and she was telling everybody about Jesus. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And there was another time where things got really quiet and I'm like, what is she doing? And we heard something. She'd set up all her stuffies and she had set up this big foam thing and she was preaching to them. She got every component of the service down.
She had the order of service right now.
And I thought, wow,
She had in her mind.
this is amazing. What you put in will come out. Satan can't bring out what we haven't allowed to be put in. And when it's amazing, people would ask us like, they'd ask us about dietary things because we take her to the doctor every year just to get her yearly physical. And they'd be like, what's her diet like? Well, she's never had meat, she's never had cheese, she's never had dairy, she's never had sugar, except for one time we gave her a probiotic that accidentally had sugar in it. And all these things, and they're like, she's never had any of them? Wow.
Then they look at her nails, they look at her hair, make sure she's getting enough calcium, and very strong, very healthy.
And it's amazing how when you raise a child with it, because you're like, well, you weren't raised this way. Well, she was. And you see children who are raised with the truths that we've been given. Now, mind you, we have done anything but perfect. And children, I am not a parent, but she's the closest I've ever come. But let me tell you, children will show you your weaknesses. They are the greatest character revealers of anything. Any selfishness that you have in your children will reveal. And it's amazing to see how you can raise a child following the principles that God has given us and to see the results.
However, we realized last year that Nalani was different than Laura was in our family because Nalani grew up with this. She hadn't really studied it. She was immersed in it. She was around it. We believe it. We talk about it. But she hadn't really studied it. And so we talked as a family and we said, you know what? We need to have Nalani study and read what we've read so she knows why she does what she does, not just this is what my family does. And it was a new dilemma for us because
We never had that.
we never had that. And so what we decided to do is we went to that box of books, we went to the testimonies, and we went to the Bible, and we pulled up the sections of what God gave man to eat in Genesis chapter 1. Remember, He gave. What did God give man to eat in Genesis chapter 1? Fruits, grains, nuts, seeds. Right? What did He give animals to eat? Vegetables. That's vegetation. So what happened in the fall? What did He change in the fall? God gave us vegetables in the fall. We'll be sharing some of these things deeper so you understand why your mom always said eat your vegetables. I'm going to ask you a question that we're going to dive into this week. Is the health message salvational?
Yes.
Wow, man, you guys are excellent. The health message is salvational. It is. And we'll be sharing some things with you. So while we're reading in the Bible, we're sharing these things with Nalani, and while we're reading it, Volume 6 of the Testimonies has amazing information about the health message.
What we decided we needed to do, more than just the doctrinal things, was explain to her why we live the way we live.
Yep.
Because does everybody live the same way?
In the church?
No. And I knew why we lived it because I grew through the journey that we have gone through and are continuing to go through. But for her, I mean, for the most part, she's lived the same way. And so we thought, we really need to root her and ground her. And she actually went through an evangelistic series. Well, we all went through the evangelistic series last year. And she, for her 12th birthday, decided she wanted to be baptized. And so on her 12th birthday, she was baptized, which was a little earlier than what we were guessing she would do it. But we had studied with her and prayed with her. And we really saw the Lord working in her heart. And it wasn't just an intellectual thing. And very quickly, it was amazing. She always wanted to be baptized in water. Not just the baptistry, but like in a lake. And it was thunderstorming all day long. And I will really abbreviate the day and a half, 2-day story. But as she was walking out to get baptized, it had been storming all day. She's walking out, like literally, there's dark clouds on both sides. The sky parts around her, and there's a rainbow that's over her as she gets baptized. Absolutely beautiful testimony to the Lord and how He cares about us. And then afterwards, everybody went in, everybody left, and the storms came back. It was just amazing how the Lord blessed. So we decided we need her to know why. So we thought, okay, we're going to take one topic by topic. And the first one we decided to do was health. Because that is one that the Lord has really impressed heavily on us, which is why we minister and we go around speaking about it, because of the impact that it's had on our lives. And we really wanted her to understand why.
What is encompassed in that is recreation, dress. I mean, Ellen White, those are all wrapped up together, so it's impossible to study just one thing.
And so what we
Nalani, would you like to come up here so you can share just a little bit, okay?
She's our shy one. Just come up here, darling. And so what we did is we took topic by topic. So what we decided to do was we were going through the testimonies. After we had gone through the Bible, we were going through the testimonies and finding all the articles that she had on diet to get all the principles that we could find and the specifics of what we could find.
And we found things in there like chess, playing chess, checkers, backgammon, coffee, all these things. And we're just going, yes, here it is. Yes, she's seeing it from God.
So Nalani, what did we find when we were reading one of the articles of the testimonies that you asked us to look into? What book? She is going to be mute at the moment. What book did we read about in the testimonies?
Healthful Living.
Yeah, so we were reading it, and she's having momentary amnesia. We were reading in the testimonies, and it mentioned some things. And there was one that was, I think, Sanctified Life, and so I was like, oh, can we look and see what that is? So we were looking up that book, and there was another one that mentioned how everybody should read the book Healthful Living.
Have you all heard of that book, Healthful Living?
Yes.
Have you read that book?
Yes.
Wow.
We had never heard of it.
We just discovered that book. That's amazing.
And she actually talks about how that book is supposed to be like a textbook. And we thought, we've never even heard of this. We've been at this for 20 years. Never even knew the book existed.
That book was published in 1897. And I read a quote this morning from that where she is saying, we as a people have had the health message for 30 years. 30 years. How long have we had the health message now? 150-ish years. She was saying after 30 years, half the people were teaching things opposite of what God was teaching. How do you think we're doing from 30 years to 150 years? How are we doing today? What, was the Lord weeping? Guess what? He doesn't want to weep anymore. And He's going to help everybody by helping us understand these things and having courage to not only embrace it, but to share it. Because it's not optional. It's not optional.
And we have seen the blessing that it's been for us. Now, I didn't lose over 100 pounds. I don't even have over 100 pounds to lose. But I do remember watching my parents, and I remember not being able to hug them and putting my arms around
Well, she
them.
was little.
Littler, yes. And I remember seeing like the health issues and my mom going through all the horrible gallbladder attacks and seeing everything that she was going through. And I remember the changes that she made and the impact that it had on her. My dad's a little science experiment at times. How much weight did he lose the first time?
I don't remember. Probably 70, 80 pounds.
70 to 80 pounds. My dad lost. We used to have a picture that we would show people before and after, but I somehow lost the before picture. I don't know. And they actually didn't take it because they thought it was good evidence of what they'd been doing. And my dad, he works a sedentary life, and he was working away, and he kept gaining more and more and more weight. Again.
I'm like, what are you eating? I know you're eating something you shouldn't be eating.
And he was eating a lot of bagels, and he started looking like a bagel. And so he came home, and we'll probably go into this later in one of our later presentations about achieving your ideal body weight. But in 6 months, 8 months,
Actually, it's been a year.
in a year, we got my dad down to less than he's been
He's lost
in.
70 pounds.
He's lost 70 pounds. And he was eating, I mean, it's not like he was eating horrible food, but he was just not eating the right food.
And he was eating a third meal.
And so we'll go over this week about how you can follow counsel and eat to obtain your ideal body weight and still eat a lot of food. Because let me tell you, we eat a lot of food and people are amazed. They're like, how do you eat so much and you're tiny? I mean, seriously. And so it's a blessing, all the things that God has taught us and all the ways that He wants us to be not only healthier, but happier. And there's a connection between the spirituality, and that's one thing that I have learned and I've seen so many times, is that when people change the way that they eat, it clears their mind and they're more readily able to discern God's voice. And that is the reason why I believe so fully in the health message. Because God wants to prepare people. Amen? Amen. And what is Satan's battle over? The mind. And what is the first thing that impacts the mind more than anything else? What we put in our mouths. And so what is Satan going to attack more than anything else? The food. So that he can get our minds. And so I am so grateful that God in His wisdom gave us the health message, because He knew, especially in these last days when the battle is going to be the fiercest, we need to have our minds the clearest that they possibly can be, because the stakes are high. And so it is a blessing that God has given us, and this week we will be going over different things that we have learned, and gems and treasures of the health message, and how God in His wisdom has orchestrated this to be a blessing, not a burden to us.
Amen. Now we wanted to just open the floor and see if you all have any questions for us. It's been a long day of sitting. You guys have been phenomenal. And I do want to tell you how much I appreciate your church today. The whole order of service was very reverent, very powerful to me. In our churches, the children aren't nearly as well behaved as in your church. The children, and I want to just encourage you and affirm you that you're doing some things right. Our children, you have an hour longer sermon than we do. And our children are allowed to bring food into the sanctuary. And I saw no food in here today. No, I saw no snacks for children. We can't understand how people can snack, because in our understanding, snacking is sin. And so your children aren't being set up for that. And I saw no toys in here today in the worship service. No toys. Lots of children, but no toys. And I want to affirm you in that. The children were learning to sit, pay attention. When they were crying, they were removed, and then they came back in. And it was very touching, very, very touching to see a church in North America worship God in a way that we could be honest. Thank you for that experience today. It gives me hope. And we needed you today. We really needed you today.
All right, so
Anybody have any questions? Well, we'll share with you the whole week. This is just our experience. This is what we're sharing with you, is our experience with God and our journey.
And one thing that I will mention about our presentations is a lot of them are physiology-based, because what we found is that a lot of people will argue with statistics.
Yep.
Like, oh, 53% of people or 60% of people will be like, well, I'm going to be at 40%. So it's not going to apply to me. But when you teach physiology-based, everybody's body runs the same way unless you have a disease. So it applies to you. And so what we have found is, Ellen and I, we have a lot of counsel about how people before they become parents should understand the physiology of the Bible. The physiology of the body so that they can help raise their children and know. A lot of times there's so much confusion about, well, should we eat 6 small meals a day or should we eat 2 meals, 3 meals? How do we do this? When do you drink with your meals or do you not drink with your meals? How do we know? And that's why God gave us physiology. Because when we study the physiology, we will know this is truth, this is error. I remember going through nursing school and there was this diet and this belief and that belief. And they're like, Laura, how in the world do you figure anything out? I said, oh, it's pretty easy. And God tells us, our body tells us, He created our body a certain way and it just works. And the body doesn't change every 2 years.
Sometimes it takes a while to work because you're so used to doing things the wrong way.
Very
That
true.
seems right. So one of the things, before I get to you, sir, I see all your hand. I need to apologize to a young lady here today. And Gazelle, what's your oldest daughter's name? Haley? Haley, you were such a good witness to me today. Do you know that? We were walking after we were eating, and she looks at me and Haley says, it's been 2 hours since we've eaten. And I'm like, oh, yeah. It's been 2 hours since you've eaten. It's not been 2 hours since I've eaten because I didn't start until 2:30. And I haven't had water hardly at all since yesterday. Shame on me. And I was so hot, and I am drinking water. And it's not been 2 hours since I've eaten. But here's Haley, and she's like, wanting a drink. She's like, has it been 2 hours? And I'm like, oh, I've been rebuked by a child. Something that I know. And so I am sorry I was such a bad example to you. And I said it sincerely because I know that and I believe that and I need to follow that. Thank you. Where was the question? Right back here in the corner with the green shirt.
Yeah, just curious to know, what is the CHIP program?
It's the Coronary Heart Improvement Project. It's actually a program that Hans Deal did, and we got trained in that about 12 years ago.
We went off to British Columbia, and Hans Deal has his program. He's a physician, and he helps people reverse heart disease. And he has a lot of credibility. Only Hans Deal left out God in his program. And so when you run CHIP programs, you don't have any lateral move to do anything other than show the video and do what you do, what he says to do. And we were always trying to tweak it and change it, and so we just run our own health programs now instead of the CHIP programs. But the information in it is accurate and works very well. We have an amazing health message that will reverse type 2 diabetes easily, that will reverse heart disease. And it's because God has created our bodies to heal and to glorify Him. And so we just have to figure out, as I love Elder Lemons, whenever there's anything wrong, the first thing we do is we look and see what of the health laws we are not applying in our life. And Elder Lemon found 11 health laws, not 8. And we went and researched it. He's accurate. He's absolutely right. There are 11 health laws, and the other 3 are purity of mind, cleanliness of home, and cleanliness of person. Those are included in all of the health laws. And so those things we need to all look at, and I encourage you to do your own study on those as well. So that's what the chip is.
Because oftentimes you don't have your own presentations, like you start somewhere.
Yeah.
And we were doing that as part of our church, and then little by little the Lord would open up doors for us. People would ask us to come and present on certain topics. And as people would ask certain topics, you develop presentations based on the topic. And so we got to where we had developed our own presentations.
And mind you, we came into the Adventist church 20 years ago into a very small community. We live in an area, I've said it a couple times. We have as many trees as you have people, and we have as many people as you have trees. And so we didn't see a lot of Adventists. I didn't really know that there were many Adventists out there. And where was I going with that? Oh, so we go off, we come into the church, we learn about Sabbath observance, and our dear friend David Ashrick says to us, there are, I can't remember all three of them, but there are a few ways for you to know if something's right to do on Sabbath. And this always stuck with us. One of those was, if the person was honoring God and observing the Sabbath, would you be able to do this? So if an airline owner was observing the Sabbath, could you fly on Sabbath? No. So that's easy, isn't it? So I don't fly on Sabbath. So if a gas station owner was observing the Sabbath, could you get gas on Sabbath? Even if you had just a credit card, could you get it? No, because they'd shut the pumps down, right? Because you can't profit. That has been a really, really big help to us. So we go out to British Columbia for our first Adventist thing. We go to GYC and ASI now, but we trained, and Laura and I, it's in a hotel, and they have a convention center, and as it gets closer to Friday and Sabbath, we're like, well, what are we going to do for food? They're all eating in the cafeteria. They're feeding us. And so we're uncomfortable with that, right? So what do we do on Sabbath, Laura? What do we do Friday? Do you remember?
Grocery shopping.
We walked to the grocery store, and it wasn't a health food store, so we were limited. So we had apples and bread and peanut butter. And all the Adventists were going into the convention center being served by their people on Sabbath. And I'm like, how does this fit? And maybe it's because we weren't always Adventists and we came into it. It seemed different to us. Maybe it's because we had not gone out to eat, or, we hadn't even stayed in a hotel. That was the first time we stayed in a hotel on Sabbath since we became Adventists. And we're just like going, wow, but this just doesn't feel right. We just basically stayed in our room that Sabbath because we didn't know what else to do. So a lot of the things that we're learning along the way, we want to share with you our journey, share with you the principles that we've learned, that principles are not optional. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Jesus, John the Baptist, they all followed principles, and they were faithful unto death. Because of those principles, principles are not optional. They will save you in the end. And so I just felt compelled to share that. I don't know why. So anyway, any other questions? Comments?
Okay, if we could have Pastor come up to pray to close, that would be great.
I'm actually just going to have a whisper thought since we go in that direction. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Amen, church. Indeed, has been a blessing thus far.